After a few weeks, the Russian invasion of Ukraine has done a hell of a number on the Russian military. It sounds like, based on some of the estimates that are coming forward, depending on how much you believe these things, the Russian army might have lost collectively as much as 15,000 troops. It's believed that they've maybe lost as many as 90 fighter jets, and they've even started to lose some ships at most recent report. So the Russian invasion of Ukraine is really not going very well for Vladimir Putin. And as it pertains to this invasion, yeah, that is the most important thing. I mean, the toll that it's taking on the Russian military is something that you can measure literally in human lives, and obviously that matters. But there are also other ways in which the Russians are paying for their aggression against the Ukrainian people. And one of them is the complete meltdown of their hockey system as a result of a lot of these sporting boycotts. And let's make no mistake about it, that is something that also does count for something. And so the most recent report is that the Kontinental Hockey League, the KHL as it's otherwise known, the Russian equivalent of the NHL. It might not even necessarily be generous to suggest that it's the number 2 hockey league in the world. I mean, I can think of some other leagues that would happily contest that. But I think the general consensus is that the KHL, at least up until now, was the number 2 the number 2 league in the entire world. And at the most recent report, they've shut down a lot of their junior teams. A lot of those teams, they just can't afford to operate the way that they did before. It's not great for the players. And that's unfortunate, I mean, especially for the young players, but it is, imposing further costs on Russia for what they're doing in Ukraine right now, which all things considered really can only be a good thing. But this is only the most recent way that this invasion has affected, Russian hockey, in particular the KHL. There's one story that I think actually kind of slipped under the radar a little bit and was really not very well understood for just how huge a story this actually was. And that was when Dinamo Riga decided that they were going to pull out of the KHL altogether. They weren't going to continue into the playoffs. Jokerit Helsinki also did the same thing. But the big story there really is Dinamo Riga. And to really understand why that's such an absolutely huge blow to Russian hockey, you kind of have to understand Dynamo and exactly what it is. Now, one of my areas of expertise I'm pretty thoroughly versed in is actually the old Russian and Soviet hockey systems, in particular during the Cold War. And what a lot of people may or may not know about Dynamo in particular was that Dynamo was actually the sporting society of the KGB. Let me walk this back a little bit and explain a little bit about Soviet hockey. So Soviet hockey, one of the reasons why they were able to be so dominant internationally during the 60s and the 70s and the 80s was that they took a core of players and they trained and treated them. They basically played like they were professionals. All that they did was play hockey. But on the books, they were always their teams were attached to something else. And so their teams were kind of touted internationally as the amateur sporting outfit, of, say, a particular car factory, a tractor factory. Literally in the case of Tractor, that's literally it. There was Spartak, that was basically the amateur sporting society of the biggest labor union in the Soviet Union. Of course, Central Red Army. Red Army was one of the biggest ones. I mean, Central Red Army actually made up most of the Soviet international team for as long as there was a Soviet Union. And Dynamo is a very interesting case because basically Dynamo, they were basically, there's no two ways around it. I mean, they were the sporting team. They were the hockey team that was attached to the KGB. Now, let's not really overblow the significance of that. I don't think it would be reasonable to say that all of the players in any Dynamo organization were spies. But I think it is also reasonable to say that there was at least some of them that probably were. And it's one of those things that kind of makes it one of these amazing little weirdness about during the Cold War, when a lot of North American players, teams, they would host these tours by some of the Soviet teams, and Dynamo was on a few of those tours. Looking back on it, it's actually kind of unbelievable that would be allowed to happen. That the governments of Canada and the US wouldn't just say, okay, hey, yeah, no, the KGB team is not coming here. I mean, if they want to put some of their Dynamo players onto the national team and have the national team go to the Olympics, we can't really stop them. And there were some great players that came out of the Dynamo organization that did go to the Olympics as part of the Soviet Union. Probably the biggest two that come to mind for me right off the back of my hand is Alexander Maltsev. And of course, Helmut Balderas. Not really a household name, but he was a star player that actually came out of Latvia. So if not all of the players were spies all the way back then, as a matter of fact, probably most of the players weren't spies. But if that was the case back then definitely today, it's not like you can say that, say, the players on Riga, Latvia would all be spies. I mean, that's kind of crazy. But there is something that really has to be, that really can't be understated, and that was these Dynamo teams in the KHL that have existed outside of the Russian borders, in Minsk and in Riga. Those are the two that most easily come to mind. There was a very high amount of what I would call strategic symbolism attached to those teams. The fact that somebody would operate those teams today, with no real attachment to the Russian state, and still call them Dynamo, and still basically name them after the sporting organization of the KGB, there is a huge statement of influence and domination there. And so obviously, with Belarus being a close ally of Russia in this invasion, which is one of the reasons why the IIHF did make the move to ban Belarus from international competition right alongside the Russians, obviously Dynamo Minsk was not going to pull out of the KHL. Belarus is in Putin's pocket. The symbolism holds up. But the fact that Dinamo Riga would pull out, there's also a statement there that Latvia is its own country that's broken away from the old Russian Empire. As much as Putin does want to rebuild it, Latvia is not going to go along quietly, and nor should they. Absolutely not. So really, this team's withdrawal from the KHL is really not just a symbol of the fact that the owners of this team are unwilling to be involved with this sort of a thing, but it's a symbol of outward defiance against Putin's agenda of rebuilding that old Russian/Soviet empire. And given exactly how important sport is politically, I mean, to the Russian people, and always has been, going all the way back to the Soviet Union, there's no getting around it. This actually is a little bit of a black eye to Putin, and I am overjoyed to see it, frankly.